In the last couple of weeks I received a lot of questions, a lot of inquiries for me to review this. This is the Fujifilm GFX50S and it's Fujifilm's first digital medium format camera. 2 months ago I did my first test shoot with this camera. I had a test camera for about a week, and even until today I'm still trying to figure it all out. So don't see this as a real review. This is more like a first impressions video. Of course, the big thing about this camera is the sensor. This sensor is huge, and that's what this camera is all about. The files that come out of this camera are simply gorgeous. Of course the files are huge. This is a 51 and something megapixel camera, so it's like you can keep zooming in, you can keep cropping and still get very good image quality. But that's not the only thing. The most important thing for me is the overall quality of these files, and it is impressive. The sharpness is just mind-blowing, sometimes maybe even too sharp. The dynamic range is just amazing, and there's just this overall different look to medium format images because of the bigger sensor that you don't get with full frame cameras or APS-C type sensor cameras. I've read a number of times that the GFX is a bit like a slightly bigger X-T2. Although it's clear that there are some similarities and even the same materials, the same buttons and dials used, I don't agree with that statement of them being very similar. In fact, I think the GFX is sitting a lot better in my hand than an X-T2. This grip is a lot deeper, so you have a very good connection to it, and to the back there's also this grip which really helps to hold the camera in one hand, very stable, even with the longer, heavier lenses. It's very well balanced. It's surprisingly light, even the lenses are surprisingly light. It's still not bigger or heavier than a full frame DSLR camera. So the dials and buttons of this camera are rather familiar if you are using any of the X series cameras, but even to DSLR users, this camera can be completely adapted to the way that you're used to shooting. A lot of these buttons are not even marked, so they're completely programmable. You can program the dials. There's a front dial, a rear dial. They can be pushed. There's lots of buttons, so you can customize this camera completely to your needs. You can shoot with that classic Fujifilm type where you set shutter speed, ISO, aperture, or you can use more like a DSLR like type of using this camera or manipulating all these settings. So I think that is the best of both worlds. I prefer those analog style commands, but people who have been used to another type of camera will easily find a way to make this camera or to adapt this camera to their needs. One thing that I don't like about this camera is the way the strap attaches. It attaches through these two metal pins. The idea is right, and the strap is in fact great. This is the strap. It's nicely padded, very comfortable, doesn't slide off the shoulder. So it's probably the best camera strap I ever got with a camera. And the idea is that it's like a quick release thing where you just slide these over. Also on the other hand, and it is connected. The connection is pretty secure, but I don't like all the rattling around with this. I also don't like the fact that always one of the sides seems to be twisted, and then you have to twist it back to get it the strap straight. And last but not least, on the strap, if you want to access your cards, which are here, then you have to put the strap thing all the way up in order to open the door, because as soon as the strap is even just halfway down, you cannot open the car door, which is not a deal breaker, which is not a big thing, but still I would like to see it differently. The EVF on this thing is nice and bright, it's very big. It's a bit slower than we are used to on X-T2, X Pro 2. The refresh rate is a bit slower. It doesn't, it doesn't interfere with how it works or anything, but it is noticeably slower, of course, because it's a bigger sensor that has to be read out, I guess, but no problem there. There's also a nice screen on the back, the same as the X-T2, I think. It's nice to be able to flip the screen. You can also flip it horizontally, and it's a touchscreen, which comes in handy every now and then. I don't use it while shooting, but I find it handy when I'm reviewing images. So you can just swipe through the images, double tap to check your focus and everything, to zoom in. So that all works really, really nice. Fuji also offers a couple of accessories to make the handling even better. There's a big battery grip that I cannot show you because I don't have one here. It makes the camera a bit bulkier, but you get an extra battery and you get that vertical grip, so you can shoot better in portrait mode. I'm not the biggest battery grip fan, so you probably won't see it on any of my cameras, but other people prefer it. I can imagine if you use longer, heavier lenses that it also can come in handier. There's also a tilting adapter, so the viewfinder actually comes off pretty easily. So this is the viewfinder, and there's a hot shoe here, there's a connections for the viewfinder, and there's this piece that goes between the viewfinder and the camera that allows you to tilt and swivel your viewfinder, which I think is a very clever idea, but also I think it is very, very expensive for that kind of accessory. When it comes to performance, there's a new battery. It's like they glued two X Pro 2 batteries together or something, but it's a new battery, and it lasts pretty long. I've done a number of test shoots with this camera and I never ran out of battery, so I figure if you have like one spare, you could probably last a full day of shooting, so that's good. It's also nice to have the battery door on the side, so it doesn't block any tripod mounts or anything you might have on your camera, so good job on that. So the camera, the overall speed is not super fast, but it is fast for medium format. So as long as you don't expect X-T2 speed, you should be fine for most of your needs. This is, after all, not a sports camera or anything, so I think it is fast enough in most circumstances. Autofocus is pretty reliable, pretty fast, pretty decent. Again, not top class, but that is to be expected, as this works completely with a contrast detection autofocus. It's not the fastest in the world, but it's the most accurate way of autofocusing, and I wouldn't be surprised if Fujifilm would come with newer firmware updates to make the autofocus even better, but like I said, it is not a deal breaker for this kind of camera. It's probably even pretty fast compared to other medium format cameras. The added bonus is that you have a lot of autofocus points. You have, I don't know, 400 and something, I guess, autofocus points, so you can focus pretty much anywhere you want, while a lot of other medium format cameras only have a reliable center focus point. So not the fastest, but fast enough and fast for medium format. If we talk about speed, there is this one thing that is a bit of a downside, and that's the sync speed. So the flash synchronization speed of this camera is a 125th of a second, which is a bit slower than most cameras. Most cameras with smaller sensors have like a 250th of a second or something in that area. 125th can be a limiting factor, of course, but there are no leaf shutter lenses yet, or at the moment. I don't know if there are any planned, but the thing is, leaf shutters allow you to sync at higher shutter speeds, but they make the lenses a lot heavier and more expensive, so it's always a bit of a trade-off. There are options coming for high-speed sync. I think there are already a couple of options to use high-speed sync in combination with Fujifilm cameras, but I know Godox is one of the brands that's working on a high-speed sync option to use with Fujifilm cameras, so we should have options. There's also ND filters that we can still use, so I don't see it as too much of a limitation, although I wish it would have been a higher sync speed, of course, but there are ways to work around, and when the manufacturers of flash and strobe equipment come along with some good high-speed sync options, I think we won't be talking about that anymore. So all in all, this is not the fastest camera in the world. It's definitely not the prettiest camera in the world. I think that price goes to the new Hasselblad, but it's without any doubt the most user-friendly medium format camera that I have ever used. I haven't used all of them, but I have tried most of them, and I think the Fujifilm is head and shoulders above most of the competition when it comes to how it handles, the ease of use. This basically handles pretty close to a smaller chip camera, and it's not as cumbersome as most medium format cameras on the market. I have briefly played with a 120mm macro lens. I've also briefly played with the zoom lens at 32-64, and both of those lenses are excellent, but I haven't had enough experience with them, to be honest, to be reviewing them. I haven't had a chance to play with the 110 and the 23 that have been announced very recently. I'm looking forward to play with them, but on the other hand, I like to keep things simple, and the one lens that I can comment on is the 63mm f2.8, because that's the one that I've been testing out most of the time. So if you know me, you know that I like the 35mm lens on my X Pro 2 X-T2. It's just my preferred focal length, and the 63 is about that same focal length, about the same as a 50mm on a full frame camera. So the 63 is sharp, very, very sharp. Even wide open, it's very sharp, and once you start stopping it down, it becomes incredibly sharp with very, very little distortion. One thing I don't really like about this lens is the fact that it's externally focusing. So once you start focusing, the lens moves in and out. It's not a big deal, but I would have preferred internal focusing, but I guess that has to do with weight, budget, physics, all things that I don't know much about except for weight. But yeah, all in all, I really love shooting with this 63mm lens. Until very recently, digital medium format cameras were for high-end commercial photographers, fashion photographers, studio photographers. In short, photography where there was a very good budget and controlled environments. But with this camera, it is way more affordable than most of the medium format systems, and it is also way more user-friendly. This is something that is a self-sustainable unit, so you can use one photographer with one camera. So it is aiming at new markets. I think it will appeal to new markets, people who didn't have a need or didn't think it would be feasible to start shooting digital medium format within their kind of work, might now get interested in digital medium format. However, this is still not for anyone and anything. For starters, the huge files that come out of this camera, they show the good, but also the bad and the ugly. Every little mistake you make gets amplified with these huge ultra sharp files. If you miss focus by just half a centimeter or a centimeter, you will see it. If you have a bit of camera shake, you will see it. So for example, With this lens, I generally don't shoot below 1/250th of a second unless I'm on a tripod with this camera. While I would be happily shoot at a 125th or a 60th on any of my X cameras. So it does require a different, slower and more deliberate approach to photography. And although this is not bigger than a full frame DSLR, it's also not heavier. It is quite a bit heavier and bulkier and slower than any of my X cameras. So being that fly on the wall is a bit more difficult with this. So it's not the kind of camera that I would use to mingle at a wedding reception, for example. And even though it may be affordable for medium format, it is still a lot of money. And it's not just the camera, the lenses are also pretty expensive, the accessories are expensive, and you need a lot more storage. You need faster cards for and bigger cards for this camera. You need more storage on your computer. You may need a faster computer to process those files. So that all adds up, and it becomes quite a big investment if you compare it definitely to the X series cameras. The only person who can decide if the GFX system is for you is you. It really depends on what you shoot, how you shoot, and what your budget is. I think I look pretty good with this camera in my hands, but is it for me? That is a difficult question. In fact, it's a question that I've been thinking about for 5 or 6 weeks since I've tested this camera over 2 months ago. After a lot of thinking, a lot of calculations, a lot of looking at files, a lot of testing, a lot of talking to friends who have one of these, I decided to take the plunge and fork out the cash, because this is my GFX. I just got the GFX50S last week with the 63mm 2.8 and 1 extra battery. That's it. That's the only thing that I could definitely afford. I might add other lenses later, but I will have to think long and hard about them. If I'm completely honest, my current kind of jobs, my current clients don't require this type of camera. But I'm not thinking about current clients and current jobs when I decided to buy the GFX. I'm thinking about future clients and future projects. And the thing is, buying this is part of a much bigger story. I'm in the middle of, or actually at the start, but I've already started. I'm about to do a complete business redesign. After being in the business for 12 or 13 years now, I always kind of went with the flow and not really thought a lot about where I was going, and I just drifted from one thing into the next. But at this point I feel like I'm doing too many different things. I'm spreading myself out too thin. I've learned a lot in the last couple of years about what I want to do and don't want to do, and I think it's time to reevaluate everything, reevaluate the kind of photography that I do, the kind of clients I want to work for. All that kind of things is something that needs a big change, actually. I'm pretty sure that this is going to be a major change. It's probably the most or the biggest change I've ever done in my business. This is going to be a long process. It's going to take weeks, probably months, in order to change things over, because there always has to be a period where I still have to make money, so I cannot just change from one day to the next, and there's a lot of work that will go into it. Buying the GFX is part of the strategy. It's going to be used a lot, I think. So I'm going to take you with me on this journey of redesigning my business over the next months in a couple of videos. I think it's always interesting to reevaluate yourself, and I hope you might find that interesting too. Now, in the meantime, I'll be doing a lot of shooting and testing with this thing, because I don't really feel I can shoot with it, but I don't really feel that I can understand and know every little thing about it. And although I've been shooting with Fujifilm cameras exclusively for over 5 years now, this is a different beast. This is a different system, and I have to get to know this even better to give you a full review. So I will definitely be posting shoots and everything that I'm doing with this thing, part of my redesign or not, we'll see about that, but I'll be doing a lot of shooting to really get to know the beast. See you next time.